First-year high school classmates and members of the Student Cultural Society are Teichai Igashi, Iori Nages, Himeko Inaba, Yui Kiriyama, and Yoshifumi Aoki. As Teichai, Iori, and Himeko try to brainstorm about a new topic for a news article, Yoshifumi and Yui later arrive in the clubroom and claim to have temporarily switched bodies the previous night. Teichai, Iori, and Himeko are pretty skeptical of this, but when Iori goes to a classroom to retrieve a notebook, it is soon proven to be real when Teichai suddenly switches bodies with Iori and briefly gets hit on by the class president, Meiko Fujishima. After spending the rest of the afternoon convincing Himeko what had happened is real, Teichai and Iori eventually switch back to their original bodies before the five of them leave school to return to their homes. After the gang are excused from absence in class, Teichai briefly ends up switching places with Yui before getting grilled by Iori over what happened the previous day while he was in her body. Just then, the gang is approached by someone who had swapped bodies with their homeroom teacher Ryuzen Godu, calling himself Heartseed, who is revealed to be responsible for the body swapping, vaguely explaining the situation before leaving. A week later, the group discuss how best to handle the situation without making anyone else suspicious. As Iori later swaps bodies with Yoshifumi, she talks with Teichai about how the switching may affect their individuality before she switches back. The next day, as Teichai and Himeko switch and end up volunteering for off-campus cleaning duty with Meiko, Himeko decides to get revenge against Teichai and declare to Meiko that Iori is hers while in Teichai's body. As Teichai questions Himeko about what she said in front of Meiko, she implies to Teichai that he has feelings for Iori while also worrying about how the body swapping could eventually break them. Later, Teichai and Yoshifumi learn that Yui has androphobia, the fear of men. That night, as Teichai switches with Yui, they meet up in a park, where she reveals she gained that fear after almost being hurt by a man in middle school. Believing there was no way she could beat a man in a fight, wanting to help her get over her fear, Teichai teaches Yui that the crotch is the one weakness that all men possess. The next day, as Yui becomes a bit more confident and decides to take up martial arts again, Himeko suddenly collapses before Teichai. As Teichai and Iori escort Himeko home, Teichai is forced to spill the beans about what happened last night with Yui, leaving Iori a bit shocked as she was unaware of Yui's androphobia. After dropping Himeko off, Iori tells Teichai about the troubles she faced due to her mother Rieka Nages constantly getting remarried, having to keep changing her persona to fit the tastes of others while eventually forgetting who she originally was, and she feels that the body swapping would cause her to just fade away. The next day, Teichai confronts Himeko, who eventually reveals that she cannot trust them to use another's body for evil deeds, hating herself for feeling that way. As Teichai tells Himeko she does not need to change who she is to be accepted by others, he tells her a secret that he has wanted to be with her and the other girls in the past. Moved by his confession, Himeko decides to share her issues with the others and finds the others accept her. Yoshifumi once again confesses to Yui, but she declines since she is not ready to date anyone just yet. Iori pretends to have swapped places with Himeko to find out how Teichai feels about her, after he says that he likes their current relationship. Teichai realizes his folly and chases after her, finding her on a bridge over the river. Teichai expresses his admiration for her and confesses to her, but Heartseed suddenly possesses Iori and forces her to jump off into the river, which results in her being hospitalized for intensive care. Heartseed, who then possesses Godu, tells the others that Iori will soon die, allotting them 30 minutes to decide amongst themselves whose soul will die with her and giving them the ability to switch bodies on verbal request. As Iori swaps with Yoshifumi and learns of the situation, she offers to die with her own body, not willing to sacrifice anyone else. As she spends time talking to everyone individually, she confesses to Teichai and kisses him while in Himeko's body. It turns out that Iori managed to survive and that Heartseed planned out this whole ordeal. As Iori recovers from her injuries and returns to school, the gang assume that the body swapping has stopped, while Himeko gets revenge on Teichai for stealing her first kiss. 3 weeks following the body swapping incident, Teichai and Iori have yet to have a chance to talk alone since the club has been busy writing a paper. The next day, Teichai, Iori, and Himeko learn from Meiko that Yui and Yoshifumi had been taken into police custody after Yui had beaten up some guys hitting on some girls, while Yoshifumi was trying to protect her from being taken away. As Teichai, Iori, and Himeko discuss the voices they had been hearing in their heads, Heartseed appears again, explaining that they are being put through a new phenomenon in which their bodies will impulsively act on their deepest desires. As Teichai, Iori, Himeko, and Yoshifumi discuss how they need to be more careful to try and not get innocent people involved, Himeko hides her doubt from the others. Later, Iori calls Teichai to tell him they should put off dating until the phenomenon is over. As the others grow concerned about Yui, who has not shown up at school since the incident, Himeko tells Teichai he could be in danger if his desire to help others is unleashed. As the others visit Yui the next day, day, she reveals her worries that she might end up hurting others again. But Himeko ends up unleashing her desire to scold her, stating her belief that they could all be in danger if they do not satisfy Heartseed's desire for entertainment. As Himeko tries to keep herself out of situations, Taechai's desires cause him to argue with her and lectures her for giving up on her friends and being a coward. She is visibly hurt by this and walks away, with Takai showing remorse for his words. As Himeko distances herself from the others, concerns over Yui cause Taechai and Yoshifumi to argue with each other. When Iori tries to stop them from fighting, Taechai's desires cause him to inadvertently injure her. The next day, as Mako makes plans with the class for a field trip, Iori becomes worried as both Himeko and Taechai are becoming more distant from her. At that moment, Mako steps in, declaring that Himeko and Iori will be a part of her group, much to Himeko's annoyance, as she argues that she can't make such decisions, but Fujishima tells her as class representative she can. Thus, she has no say in the matter. Later, Goto asks Taechai to help him carry some school equipment. As Takai doesn't know what to do, Goto suggests that Taechai should turn to his friends for advice, while Mako later suggests that Taechai should consider what is most important to him. Taechai apologizes to Iori and tells her that he would rather stay with his friends and risk hurting them than distance himself from them. After making up with Iori, Taechai also manages to make up with Yoshifumi, but Himeko is still avoiding them. Recalling how the body swapping allowed Taechai to help Yui with her androphobia, he and Yoshifumi assure Yui that their desires can be controlled with enough will and convince her to attend school again. Meanwhile, Heartseed appears at Himeko's house at night, bringing to light her withheld feelings that she fears could tear apart the group if revealed. As the school goes on the field trip to the mountains, Himeko remains concerned over what Heartseed had told her. Iori takes notice and learns that Himeko also has romantic feelings for Taechai. Iori confronts Himeko, who reveals that she never acted on her feelings as she did not want the group to fall apart, believing no one would want a weakling such as herself, and she didn't want to put herself between Iori and Takai. Iori tells Himeko to stop putting herself down and reassures her their friendship will always remain despite her flaws and their shared love of Taechai. Just as they make up, Heartseed possesses Iori and tells Himeko that Taechai had been in an accident, causing Himeko to panic, believing he had fallen down a cliff. Upon discovering had simply fallen off a tree while rescuing a kitten, remaining relatively unscathed, Himeko breaks down in tears out of relief. With the desire unleashing phenomenon declared over, Himeko decides to confess to Taechai and, despite getting rejected, remains confident in the fact she may one day win against Iori and then gives him a kiss. Laughing gleefully, Inaba looks toward a brighter future where she can be true to her feelings. On the day before winter break, following a brief period of peace after the desire unleashing incident, a new phenomenon takes place in which Iori and Yui temporarily revert to children from noon to 5 o'clock in the afternoon that day. After returning to normal, they lose memory of what happened, but remember things from when they were that age. Later that night, a second Heartseed appears before Taechai through his younger sister, Rina Yigashi, tasking him to watch over the others and warning him not to tell the others about his existence. The next day, Taechai stumbles upon Yui, who is argued at by an old karate rival, Chainatsu Mahashi, over breaking a certain promise which she cannot remember. As the gang meets up at an abandoned building, this time Himeko and Yoshifumi shrink, with the now 10-year-old Yoshifumi likening Yui to a girl named Nana Nishino. After reverting to his normal age, Yoshifumi explains that Nana was a girl he went out with once before she moved, leading him to be conflicted over how his feelings stand for both her and Yui. The next day, as Taechai and Himeko watch over a 14-year-old Iori, Himeko voices her worries. As the gang have to look after Iori, who winds up as a baby, Yui is confronted by Chainatsu, who challenges her to a karate match and defeats her. Meanwhile, Yoshifumi ponders if his feelings for Yui are because of her similar appearance to Nana. On the second day of the new year, Yui reverts to right after she was assaulted and, upon returning to normal, remembers vividly about that age. As Yui refuses to talk things out with Chainatsu and lashes out at Yoshifumi for only liking her because she resembles Nana, he scolds her for refusing to face her problems, that she keeps making excuses and giving up, and that she has no right to criticize him. Both walk away from their outbursts, ashamed of their words. Talking with Taechai alone, Yui reveals her promise with Chainatsu was to meet each other at the National Karate Tournament, which she was unable to keep after contracting her androphobia, and laments how weak and reliant she has become, but accepts her fate nonetheless. After sending Yui home, the others speak with Yoshifumi, who remembers his personal vow to live carefree and decides to go visit Nana to tell her about his love for Yui. Afterwards, Yoshifumi reconfirms to Yui that he loves her for who she is. This encourages Yui to stop stop running away and facing her own problems, embracing Yoshifumi and overcoming her androphobia. Afterwards, Himeko becomes suspicious of Teichai hiding something from everyone, as Teichai is forced to tell the others what he had been hiding. The second heartseed reminds them of the consequences, making the age revert phenomenon happen at random times and including Teichai in the phenomenon, which forces them to stay at the building to avoid others discovering themselves. Iori becomes stressed from believing that Rieka is in danger from her violent second husband, who wants to get back together with her. Iori, briefly turning younger for a short period and regaining memories of that age, is stopped by the others when she tries to head off on her own. As Teichai, Iori and Himeko reach the house and hear violent noises, they are forced to retreat after Iori turns into a baby. Just then, the first heartseed approaches them, ending the age revert phenomenon and offering Iori the opportunity to go back in time and rectify some of the bad decisions she made in her youth. After some encouragement by Teichai and Himeko, Iori declines his offer, saying that her past mistakes have allowed her to become the person she is now. Afterwards, everyone goes with Iori to see Rieka, where they both realize they had both made mistakes trying to make the other happy. After Rieka gains the encouragement to turn her second husband away, Iori gives thanks to everyone who made her who she is. Yui apologizes to Chainatsu, promising to meet her at the next karate tournament. As winter break comes to an end, Iori starts to question if she truly loves Teichai. Heartseed puts the gang through another phenomenon, in which their true emotions will be randomly transmitted to each other, shown when Iori turns Teichai down when he asks to start dating her 3 days later. As Valentine's Day comes and Mako suggests Teichai turn his attention towards Himeko, the gang grows concerned when they learn Godu will only be able to be an advisor for one club, meaning they will have to outdo the jazz band club in a presentation in order to keep him. While the discussion turns to Valentine's Day, both Himeko's feelings for Teichai and Teichai's rejection by Iori gets transmitted to the others. As Himeko tries to get Iori to speak her reasons, Iori's selfish thoughts end up getting transmitted to everyone, which in turn leads Iori to hear everyone's concerned thoughts about her, including a harsh one from Himeko. When Himeko asks Iori about it privately, Iori responds that the experiences with Heartseed has affected her decision-making, which makes her uncertain about if she actually loves Teichai or not. Afterwards, Teichai and Himeko have a talk, where she confronts him for not talking to her first before he asked Iori out, listing the things he likes about Himeko, although still pointing out he is in love with Iori. As the gang decides what to do for their presentation, Yoshifumi hears Iori's thoughts about how everyone has their own idea of her personality. Later, Heartseed approaches Yoshifumi and notices how useless he is, which urges Yoshifumi to strengthen his resolve with thoughts of Yui, who also hears his thoughts. As Iori struggles with her identity, she ends up being cold and distancing herself from everyone around her, first shown when she turns down Shoto Shirayama, a boy from the jazz band club, also angering Kaoru Satoshi, who reprimands her for this, but Iori brushes aside her threats and offends her, unintentionally making enemies with her in the process. When Teichai hears Himeko thinking about disbanding the Student Cultural Society, she explains it as a possible method to stop Heartseed from interfering with them, though Teichai easily tells that she does not want it to come to that. Concerned about Iori, Yui later tries to reason with her, but Iori just responds that her changing personality means that she can no longer be friends with Yui. As Yui is approached by Heartseed that evening, she resolves to stop relying on others so much, later giving Teichai some encouragement to help save Iori. The next day, Himeko tries to get Iori to say what she truly feels, in which Iori responds by saying that it is Himeko's selfishness concerning Teichai that is to blame. As the gang continues on their presentation without Iori, Teichai makes a bold statement in class in order to quell the rumors surrounding Iori. However, Kaoru, a girl who Iori infuriated the other day, is not fooled by this and plots to scheme something as payback, worrying Iori in the process. Later, the gang returns to the clubroom to find their presentation has been torn to shreds. Despite the others putting it aside and deciding to remake the project from scratch, Iori becomes infuriated at Kaoru for supposedly getting others involved and threatens to get revenge. This forces Teichai and Himeko to stop Iori in her tracks, managing to stop her from hurting Kaoru. After calming her down, Himeko forces Iori to explain why she's distancing herself by sharing an embarrassing dream about Teichai. Iori eventually breaks down, and due to all the stress and suffering the Heartseed incidents have caused her, She reveals that she's had enough of the suffering and how she cannot stand to keep up her fake, cheerful personality anymore. Himeko responds that she shouldn't care what other people think and she should just live the way she wants to, whilst Taechai mentions that he still loves her even if it was not her true personality. As Iori asks to think about it, Himeko encounters the group of boys who were responsible for messing up the club room, and when she tries to confront them, she ends up being taken away by them. As Taechai, Yui and Yoshifumi learn of Himeko's abduction via the emotion transmission and rush to save her. Iori remains conflicted over what she should do, but inevitably decides to follow Taechai and Himeko's advice and lie for herself. As the others start fighting against the boys who took Himeko, one of them puts a sharp object towards her. Just then, Iori arrives and manages to use the emotion transmission to get Himeko to safety and taking down the last guy. Kaoru, who showed resentment towards Iori for turning down Shoto in the past, apologizes for taking her actions too far, noticing that Kaoru also changed personalities to be accepted by others. Iori gives Kaoru the same advice that she was once given before and soon befriends Kaoru. As the gang makes their way home, one of the abductors comes at them with a metal pipe, hitting Taechai as he protects Himeko. After Taechai and Iori have a mental discussion via the emotion transmission, where they decide to start their relationship from scratch, Taechai awakens and decides to ask Himeko out, to which she agrees. Elsewhere, Iori is suddenly greeted by Heartseed, who tells her that the phenomenon is over. Iori accuses him of turning her against her friends, but he denies it and tells her she learned something from it, and he takes his leave. As the phenomenon comes to its conclusion, Goto is impressed by the gang's presentation and decides to continue moderating both clubs. Mako tells Taechai that her father arrested the abductors and they won't be bothering them again. With Taechai and Himeko now dating and Iori making friends again, the gang enter the new school year with their paths ahead of them. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing.